What's up, guys? When it comes to the Bible, a lot of people ask me how I can have so much faith in a book that's just written by man. They bring up things like the Council of Nicaea and say that it's just a bunch of stories stolen from other mythologies or just totally made up by man in general. While, those are valid questions, once you actually investigate that, you'll see that it's not true. The Bible can be verified. It is very authentic, and it just takes a little bit of research to see that. So we all know people like Peter, John, Matthew, right? But what about the other disciples that carried it on, like Mark, who is a part of the main Gospels, or Ignatius, or Polycarp, names that we don't hear that often, who were disciples of the disciples, who carried those same stories on. They match up exactly with the Gospels that we know. So things like that kind of help verify that the Gospels aren't just made up. These writings are from years and years ago. And as far as the Council of Nicaea goes, where a lot of people say that, a lot of the corruption and stuff like that happened, while they did maybe choose to leave some books out, they weren't just writing stories there. They had a collection of books that had been around for years and years, and they were already, quoted and well-known books. That's why the Council of Nicaea was formed in the first place, because those books were so prominent that they were saying, hey, let's come together and, take these sacred texts and form what we know today as the Bible. Now, is there corruption in things like the Catholic Church? Yes. And other sects of Christianity as well. But that is the sin of man. That does not disqualify the existence of God, which a lot of people don't realize. Of course, there's corruption everywhere. Yes, the Catholic Church has a, somewhat of a dark history as far as over there in Rome and the Vatican and stuff. That's very true. That's very, very true. And people say that Christianity was just formed for power. Well, those disciples were getting beheaded and, burned alive. So no, they didn't start it for money and fame, because it was quite the opposite until 325 AD, 325 years after Christ's death, that Emperor Constantine said, hey, you know what? We can't stop this movement, so let's adopt it and make it the faith of Rome, and make it the, national faith. And they mixed in some other pagan rituals with it, and that's why some people say, oh, Christianity is just pagan. Nope, it's much deeper than that. You got to do some research. The only reason that, like I said, Rome did that, they tried to take advantage of it and use it for power and use it to help govern the people. Who's to say if Constantine really believed in Jesus or not? That's a different story, but the point is, it was already a movement, and it wasn't just founded for power. It wasn't until 325 years, again, after Jesus, that it was even talked about and began to be used as a sort of governed religion. So the movement was already so big, and people were literally being killed for it for over 300 years. So, those are very important details. Guys, I also want to point you to people like J. Warner Wallace, who is an author, detective, who has done a lot of nice research, written some great books like Cold Case Christianity. Also Lee Strobel, who wrote Case for Christ. These are people you can go and read their work and, get those questions answered that you might have about the authenticity of the Bible. I've got a short video for you today from J. Warner Wallace, and that's how we're gonna end today. Check this video out, guys, and again, do your research on the Bible, because I promise you, it's the truth. Cheers.
If you've ever read some of the ancient mythologies, they're really interesting, right? But it's pretty clear that the authors of these mythologies didn't think they were writing history. They weren't writing as eyewitnesses, for example. They were often writing hundreds of years after these things they were describing. And they never claimed to have seen it with their own eyes. Well, that's very different than the claims of the New Testament gospel authors. These folks actually said that they were disciples of Jesus, who knew him personally, knew his family. They had seen him preach. They had seen his life. That's a very different kind of claim, because if you want to lie about Jesus, just wait until everyone knows the truth is dead. But if you're going to write early in history, and that's the difference between the mythologies, written hundreds of years after the fact, and the Gospels, written within the lifetime of eyewitnesses. Well, this is what makes them history rather than mythology. The story of Jesus is reliable. The story of Athena is simply fiction.